Good evening. I'm Crimson with Shine a Light in the Dark, and I am here with the amazing Alan from Solelyveil. And they actually just released their new song, Fragments. I think it was yesterday. And I
hmm
love the new song. What was the inspiration for that? And also, too, before we get into that, I guess I forgot to
Uh-huh.
ask you to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Um, what is there to know? Um, there's a lot. I'm trying to think of like, okay, how can I take this and make it that? Um, to me, I've been through a lot that life can throw at you and more. And I always tell people, and I've told friends this and employees this, that doesn't matter what happens yesterday, it matters what you do with it and what you do today. And, I had a very good colleague, an older colleague of mine a long time ago. He never ever complained about anything, and it gave me inspiration, even for current things that I've dealt with or dealing with. He said, they haven't buried us yet or thrown dirt on us yet, so it must be a good day. And he would always
Yeah.
say that. And I was like, that is the oddest thing to just always say. And then it kind of put it into perspective. Like his life story was 10 times worse than mine was and 10 times more difficult. And it's a whole, theory that if he can get through it, I can get through it. But actually applying it, applying the action, applying the gratitude, that was the hard part. That's what they don't tell you. So for me, I'm just very thankful to be here. Um, I have a wonderful life despite anything, and I believe we're all here to help in some way. And first starts with listening. There's a reason why you have two ears and one mouth. So I wonder what you need to use a little bit more.
No, I absolutely love that. And I love even the perspective shift that you said with that. I never thought of it that way though, with the two ears and one mouth, but if you don't mind, I will totally give you credit for that. But like I may add that to my repertoire of sayings because
Yeah.
I like that because it's true. And it does all start, what do they say? Like knowledge and wisdom is gained through listening, not by speaking. A wise man speaks slow and
Yeah.
listens. And so
Yep.
I love
And
that.
I've had a
And I
lot of
love,
mentors and who've said things similar to that. So yeah, it helps. I've been able to mentor folks throughout the years and help in places I didn't think I could help or had any skill to do as such. And then all of a sudden I said something that saved a life. I wrote a song that did something for somebody. And then, you know, I was always told if you're seeing people going through something that's hard, or you think you're going through something hard, find somebody who's going through something worse and try to help them. Because through service, it helps you forget, like, oh, this is not really that big of a deal. I'm really having an anxiety attack over X, Y, and Z. Are you serious? And this person's like, is at the end of their life. What am I complaining about? It's all a choice. Just choose to do the right thing and choose to do things that matter.
I,
So
I really like too how you mentioned like through service because not only does it help us forget about it, but it also helps us heal parts of ourselves that we're like, have you ever heard the saying that we become who our inner child would have needed at the time? Like we almost become that protector or that whatever we needed back in that time. And when we're really helping people, we're actually helping heal parts of us
yeah,
that weren't seen or heard during those times. And so it puts them perspective that other people have it worse and also healing like parts of us at the same time, which is really cool.
yeah, it's that iron sharpens iron that we always think, oh my gosh, woe is me, this is worse. I've seen some people and even myself go through stuff, and you have not humanly possible to get out on the other side. And we've seen folks that haven't got out on the other side on that. And it happens. It's like the walking testament. It's like you gotta put action in if you want to make things better, get your body moving. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the truth. Like there's something ancient about it when you're going through something and you just need to get your body moving because your body starts to release, get rid of that cortisol that causes the stress, the panic, the idle minds, do bad deeds. And yeah, so but I've been able to do a lot. So
Yeah.
but yeah, and then
It,
I'm trying to think a little bit in a nutshell about myself. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I've never touched a drug my whole life. I've helped people out who who have been addicts, who have been dealing with it or currently dealing with it, who are trying to get clean in some respects. Um, I've done a lot of work for people privately in that realm. And, I don't try to, I never tell people to be me or I be them at all in any way. You know what I mean? Um, I just said, I'm a straight edge guy. I don't live that life. I don't waste time. I understand that time is like the biggest and the best thing that we got, and a lot of people
Yeah.
waste time. I mean, I've sat with folks and broke it time down to them and to help, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "You're wasting 8 hours of your day." They go, "Wow," and then you're complaining about what you don't have, not like money or monetary things like a car or anything. Like you don't have good friendships or just a good relationship. And I'm like, well, when you waste a lot of time, your mind just goes against you and starts to become extraordinarily idle and just starts to self-sabotage. Oh my gosh, what if this is going to happen? So I really, personally, for me, I always try to be there for people who actually want help. And we live in a need mindset. Oh, I don't need it. I can, no. That creates laziness. Like, I want a better life. I want to be breathing tomorrow. I want to have good friendships and actual relationships with people who actually want to be here for me. I want these things. That's what gives that motivational actual factor that lasts, you know. Um, I have 3 kids, married, very boring kind of life in comparison to some people, but I mean, it's kind of me in a nutshell.
No, I love that. And even from an energetic perspective, I like how you talked about like helping those who are willing to help themselves and that want help because sometimes, especially those who have been through a lot and those that want to help heal people, right? Like
Hmm.
a lot of reserves and energy and draining can be used if the other person actually doesn't want to receive the help.
Yeah, and I think, well, I don't think, I know for a fact that there are a lot of people out there that, um, what have they said? I read this in an old book that I found on audio, and I'm trying to remember what it's called, but they said most people are obsessed with depression. I was like, that's a very cold way of looking at it in that perspective. And then the psychiatrist or psychologist at that time in the 70s started to break it down and explain it. I'm like, wow, this makes sense. He said we become obsessed with depression because we get so in need for attention that depression grabs a lot of people's attention. Then you become
Hmm.
obsessed with that kind of attention because they're trying to now solve all your problems that you need to figure out, hopefully for yourself through counseling, through eating right, exercising, meditating, whatever you believe, right? But it's true. And I know a lot of people who have been through that, mental blocks of depression, business wise, relationship, marital, kids, anything you can imagine. And I noticed that was a lot of what they were doing. It was they were spending a lot of their time just rehearsing their problems over and over and over again. And they became obsessed with it like it was a piece of jewelry or a car or something. And it's so it made sense. And you see, I've personally have seen people and do that. And I'm like, hey, well, let's just stop thinking about it. Well, it's easier for you to say. I'm like, I've been through a lot, my friend. Let's just start thinking about something else. What do you want? I want to be able to get in good shape, or I want to be able to purchase my first house, or I want to be able to have a successful relationship, whenever that is. Well, you got to start getting the body moving. Start putting things on your plate that you want to do. And you'll start noticing a lot of these issues, not that they're going to go away. Maybe you'll be able to cope or deal with them better, but you're able to kind of compartmentalize what matters most. And I think
Yeah.
that's a big factor. And I see it with a lot of counselors. I've dealt with a lot of this and seen it. And I'm like, and a lot of people come back to like, oh my gosh, you saved this or saved me or saved this situation. I was like, I didn't do anything. I was just like a person at Home Depot or like a department store that just kind of give you a little bit of shift in direction and you found your way. You were able to use those tools. We can't do it for you. You got to learn to do it for yourself. so it
Yeah,
lasts. So you don't
exactly.
come to me,
Otherwise, it
oh,
doesn't.
no, it doesn't. You know what I mean? And I think why all the ancient cultures throughout time, you saw a lot of them using their hands or being physical with something like making their own food or having to put logs on their back to go build a home in the mountains. You know, it's like they had to use their body. So a lot of those physical, like, being like, oh my gosh, I'm super depressed, but I got to build a log cabin for my family so we can survive the winter. Like all of a sudden, those problems just start to take a back seat, and then because you're working so much, the brain just goes, wasn't that big of a deal. I've seen that too, and which is not something that clinically was like the right thing, but obviously there was some wisdom to take from, our posterity and people we had to see how they dealt with it. They didn't have a lot of the tools and resources we have nowadays. It's like, how did they figure this out? You know? So anyway, so I can go on for hours on this subject, but
Oh yeah, no, no, you're
yeah.
good.
All right.
I wanted to hit on something just kind of real quickly too that you really brought to light that I wanted to say
I
too
think
is
your
like,
signal keeps
with,
to be cutting out.
can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear
it's
me now?
it keeps cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh,
Can you hear me
oh,
now?
you're fine. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Um, like when you were talking about like depression, I think that another way that we become obsessed with it too is we become comforted in the feeling of depression or anxiety because it's the feelings that we know. And especially if we've experienced either some kind of trauma or
Can you
hardship,
hear
right?
me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I didn't get any of that. It just kept cutting out pretty hard.
Okay.
I can hear you a little bit better now. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, what I was saying about like depression, right, is that we become comforted by the fact that it's all that we know.
Hmm.
And we almost have a fear of while as we can sit in the depression and realize that we want to get out of it. I've noticed that with a lot of clients, they almost fear getting out of it because they don't know what's on the other side and they're almost afraid to get their hope up again
Hmm.
because it hurts. And so I love what you were talking about when you were saying that is that it's like that part of like that getting moving is kind of that first step, and then realizing that on the other side of it, addressing like those fears of why we're afraid and keep on keeping ourselves in the same spot and not wanting to move too. And so I think that was really cool that you talked about that.
Yeah. It is. I did see something online about this a while back, and there was a gentleman that he was an ex-convict. I mean, what he was attached to, he was able to get out of jail, and he went to go help some of these teenagers. And then he had some social media. He had a website. It was a trash website. You can tell he must have built it off GoDaddy. It was just like very hard to navigate. And then all of a sudden he just went away. And then I did a bunch of research on this guy, and he said he basically that the social media world was destroying him from allowing him or his idea to heal people. And I thought that was a very strong approach. And what he did was not really something, he's like, I'm not a doctor, I'm an ex convict, but one thing I do know that helps people is work. And then while they're working, I would tell them, hey man, you're doing a great job. I don't know how to mix this concrete to make this, or know how to build this deck, or know how to do this or do that. He's like, oh, it don't matter. At least you're doing it. It don't matter. Like, you look good today. Well, I wanna lose some weight, and I used to play football. It don't matter. Let's just focus on getting healthy, man. Good job. I'm so happy you woke up today. And he would go around just coaching these people as they were working on this big piece of property. And people came from all over the world, all walks of life, both political, religious, non religion, you name it. And they all had the same thing to say. It just felt good to be in a place where everyone was building and doing something. And he said it
Yeah.
doesn't matter about the problem. It's the matter that you were the best at doing this. That you're not trying to be the best. You're not trying to be perfect. He's like, what I want you to be is just you, and focus on that. And I was like, that's it. Don't think anything else. And I thought that was so mind blowing how simple it was. Um, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's a fear of getting out of depression because that's their identity. They've been,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is me for so long. And there's always a way, no matter what. and some, I mean, I've lost friends to suicide, shootings, stabbings, just not waking up in the morning, no depression at all. The person just passed. Um, I counseled kids a long, long time ago, and one of the kids that we counseled like a long time ago, he's just no health problems and nothing. He just didn't wake up. Doctors had no idea. Parents and dad were just amazing, and his body, they said his body just gave up. It was just the strangest thing I've ever heard. But her mom or his mom had a good way of dealing with it, and she said it was just his time. We're very religious people. We understand it's his time, so we're going to honor him. We're not going to talk about anything negative. And she was whew, you talk about a strong woman. That girl's story is wow, wow. So she just would sit there and she talked at the memorial and the service, and I was like, my gosh, like who thought coming to a funeral would have a motivational speak, and hear how broad she was talking, you know. So, but yeah, I do believe it's a sense of fear, you know, that they take on. Oh, we don't have my depression anymore and I'm able to solve it, but that's all people knew. And a lot of people are feared with judgment. They're feared that they eat the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or wear the wrong thing or say the wrong thing or do something like that, that they're going to be judged and that's their end game.
Yeah.
It's not true. It's not true at all. You know what I mean? It's like, I know that. I mean, I played football. I played in a straight edge hardcore band. It was definitely not two worlds that coexist, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, my mom, we had it, all of us had you know, had the experience with the ex-military background, and I was 16 years old, and I was like, I want to play drums in a band, and I was going to rodeos my whole life, and that was like the big thing where I grew up, just big rodeos, right? And but I loved playing like hardcore music. I just loved the expression of like Ian McCabe from Minor Threat, and I also loved the storytelling of Alan Jackson. It was just such a parallels. These worlds are not supposed to exist together,
Yeah.
you know. And my mom's like, I was like, I want to play in a band. I want to play football, and I want to do all this stuff. She's like, just go do it. Who cares? Just get out there and do it. I'm like, I'm gonna put X's on my hands, and she was like, go do it. And I was like, all right. So I went and played a show at it was like a pizzeria.
Uh-huh.
And I put permanent marker X's on my hands. I was also 16 years old. I still have the picture of like in the what you call it, the newspaper my mom bought for my 16th birthday, playing drums. And then the next day was the rodeo, and it was permanent marker, and it didn't come off my hand. So I showed up at a rodeo, and everyone was like, "Why does this kid have X's on his hands?" Um, I just remember being the always like the most extreme polar opposite, you know, away from what most was conventional. But people, that's all they did was just judge me. They're like, that is so stupid and weird. But I was so happy they judged me because it doesn't matter what they say, nor will it ever matter. They're not going to do anything for me. And I was always so happy. And people were like, oh, aren't you upset because they said these things? And aren't you upset that they were talking trash on you? And I was like, why? They're spending their energy talking about me. They must really like me. And it
Yeah.
was a very odd approach for people to when I said that to them. So
Well, even at that, most of their judgments are actually judgments towards themselves, not towards you.
yeah, I love it. Bring it on.
You know,
I don't care. I got no enemy inside of my spirit, so ain't nothing outside that's gonna affect me. And
I love
it's
that.
taken it's taken many moons and many insane trials and insane things going through to get there. But I've almost died twice. You know what I mean? I knew that, but I was like, all right, it's my time to go. It is what it is, you know? And I was in a hospital dying, 2020, and I just said, they're like, oh, you're not going to get out. You're going to be in intensive care. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. What are your wishes? And at the time, my wife wasn't there when they were asking me this. I'm like, and she worked at the hospital. I'm like, they're asking my wishes. I'm assuming I must be dying or something like that. And so another day goes by, and I just said, you know what? I'm just gonna walk out of here. I'm not gonna. This isn't my end game. I want to see more life. I want to meet more people. I want to help more people. Not gonna happen. And the nurse at the time, or the hospitalist guy, told me, he's like, well, it's not good. You know, you can't walk, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I said, nope, I'll be out of here in a couple of days. He's like, been in a hospital, for 15 years of my life. It's pretty bad. And I said, nope, it's going to happen. And I walked out on the third exact day. Took me about 30 minutes to walk to the parking garage for my father-in-law to drive me home. And they're like, you need a wheelchair, you need this, you need that. I said, mm-mm. If I can't do it on my own, then I don't deserve that wheelchair. I need to earn this. I need to get out of here. Let me tell you, walking and getting out, absolute hell. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not breathe. Couldn't muster. My bones were achy. I could feel my knees moving, feel my hips moving, my back. I could feel my spine. It was the most surreal feeling in the world. But I was like, screw this. I'm getting out. So it's better to be here than not, and then honor those who came before us, who were able to get through it, and hopefully those people on the other side get the help that they need once they've crossed. So, anyways, like I said, I can talk about this for a while.
No, no, you're good. Was it from COVID? Were you in the hospital?
Yeah,
Was it?
yeah, yeah. So, um, it just, I mean, I always truck, I rarely get sick. And I was like, okay, I must have the flu, must have something. And I was trying to truck through it. And my wife, she was like, yeah, you're gonna, I don't know, this is not good. And I was like, nope, I'm gonna keep working, keep powering through it, keep getting through it. And I had to work remotely, right? Um, and then I just sat down in bed one day and I was like, fuck, I cannot breathe. She came in, COVID tested me, popped. Went to the hospital, took another COVID test to be solidified, and that was it. And it just went from healthy as a horse to literally could not breathe. I didn't sleep for 7 days. Literally could not sleep, could not eat at all, period. And then my O2 stats just dropped like a tank. And she just got me, went to one hospital and they were just like, we can't help you, go home. So basically they sent me home to die. They didn't give a shit. They didn't care. All the hospitals were checked out. They're like, we don't care. And it was very surreal to deal with that, to be at a hospital thinking that's what I come here for, to get some kind of care. And when I was in the
Yeah.
emergency room the first time, they put me in a wheelchair and there was like three people in the whole waiting room. And it was massive. And I'm like, why am I not being brought back there? Anyways, they finally, after 3 hours, bring me back. And the nurse was great. He was like long haired. We started talking about music. He was a metalhead. I was like, oh, this is cool. We started just talking about different stuff. And doctor came in. She was on her phone. I still to this day will not forget this. On her phone, she's like, okay, how you feeling? And then just looking at me, looking at her phone, looking at it. And then I about went off on her. And I said, why in the hell, when I could barely talk, I was like, why are you on your phone and not walking over and looking at the machine and looking at me? She's like, well, it looks like we're going to discharge you. And she walked away. And I was like, we are so obsessed with our damn phones that we cannot put this shit down. It is crazy to me. And I went off on her. And this male nurse guy walked in and he was just like, hey, it's all good, man. I'm going to give you something that's trying to help. He was just like the sweetest guy. I mean, super sweet. And he's like, it's all good, man. Everything's gonna be all right. Like, not one bad thing came out of his mouth. I'm like, oh, I can't breathe. And he's like, oh, well, I'll get you breathing. I can't do this. Oh, it's gonna be okay. It's like he didn't let me think negative. I was like, wow. And so, anyways, a couple days went by. It hit again, and then wife got me in the car, and she was just like, we're going to the hospital. I'm taking you in. That's it. And then they said, oh my gosh, this is really, really bad. And that's, you know, I was in there, had some motivation to get out, and it worked. I'm not saying it's going to be that way for everybody. I'm not saying my ways are going to solve everybody's ways, but maybe it inspires someone to find a way. Um, yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, it was just went from like being alive to nope, you know. And people can say whatever they want about this whole COVID thing or whatever it is, but things come along in life. We've dealt with crazy stuff like this in our human history, right? Bubonic plague wiped out 1 million people in a week, so these things are not going to stop. Just got to find different ways to deal with them. But yeah, a lot of things came out of that. A lot of people got super depressed and had their own opinion on everything, and I was just like, man, I was in the trenches of it, and I had a specific, how should you say, I thought divulging too much. I had a specific job in a business that there was, I had to be involved. And I was watching TV, and then I was also involved in what the TV was saying was going on. I'm looking around. They said, "Oh, this is going on. The bridge is shut down," and I'm standing on the bridge, and I'm looking around. There's no one on the road. The bridge is shut down. Major traffic. Won't be able to get through, and I'm driving. I'm looking around. I'm like, crap. My map. Maybe my map doesn't work. Maybe there is traffic. Well, I got home in 2.5 hours. It was just. It was like I was in a video game and like a movie. It was just
Yeah.
strange. It was weird. I was like, what do you mean the bridge is shut down? I'm on it. And there's four other cars behind me. I was like literally trying to, what are you talking about? It just, I was entrenched in it. So then to be involved and get COVID and almost die from it was another surreal experience, you know? And yeah, there's more I can talk about that, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, no, no. And I appreciate you sharing as much as you did, and I really appreciate that. And I think that it's very inspiring that you really fought through that and that you didn't lose your hope. And then you're still using that voice that, you know, almost kind of gave out to some extent, right, during that time.
Yep.
And because I mean, you just released kind of that new single, and what I thought was really kind of beautiful is you're talking about that male nurse that wouldn't let you skip a beat, that y'all even found some, like he was in that space at that exact time just for you to be able to kind of help you even stay in that right mind frame. And I know that too, kind of too, because I did want to make sure that I honored kind of like your new song with Fragments, you
Hmm.
know, and then we're talking kind of about fragmented pieces of life and then just like all the challenges that you've overcome and stuff like that. Is
Hmm.
is that kind of a part of where Fragments is coming from, or is there like a specific area of life that it's coming from? Or what's that
Absolutely.
inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Fragments is just that. It's no apology needing without being disrespectful and being exactly who I am with everything that I am. And, this gravity has pulled me under, dragging me further, out of this reality. Because what I thought was real and what I thought was actual, it wasn't. But it wasn't this, I mean, I could see the doom and gloom, but it was a decision that I had to make. Decide to suffer, that's it. There was a war that was going to happen, and bomb was going to get dropped, and we're all going to get decimated off the planet. What am I going to do? Fight back or just die? What am I going to do? What am I going to do with these fragile pieces that have been left over, these fragments, right? Of everything that has happened to me. I'm going to push forward on it, and I'm going to power through it the best way I know how and the best way I can. And if it's not popular, I don't care. And if it's not what people are looking for, I don't care. I have to get through this. I have to do it for me. Because if I don't do it for me, I can't go and preach to someone or say something to somebody if I'm not doing or living it myself. Because it's in vain, And so Fragments for me was just that. And, I had a lot of people on my team pushing me. I mean, I had Nick Miller. He helped produce some of the song and helped write some of the most amazing music to it. He's always pushed me. A good friend of mine, Edward Finley, same thing. It's just these guys would just keep pushing and pushing and pushing the music. And So it got to a point to where when it came down for lyrics, Nick was like, "All right, let's dig as deep as we can with this." And he always says, "Just go as far as you can, and let's find some inspiration on it." Like he would never settle for anything less than the greatest, you know. And the same with Ed. Ed would just push me through it like it was no tomorrow. I had one of my best friends, Eric Rushing, and a really good friend of mine, Simon Presley. Same thing. I would talk to these guys every now and then about the music, and they were just so inspirational, so motivating, so let's get through it. No problem. You got this. Like, don't worry about it. Let's just keep moving. And I had a very realistic outlook of where to take the music to where it was to where it's going to be going. So, which is kind of the same reason why I'm here today, you know?
And what I think is beautiful about that is like as a therapist, so I became a trauma therapist because of my own trauma, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so I loved how you were talking about like the decision. One of the things that I work with my clients is going back and picking up the fragments of their life because at the time they didn't have the tools to face what was going on, and so it does fragment off. But
Hmm.
also being not afraid to be in that. It's funny because I used to think that my approach as a person of throwing myself under the bus was bad. But I realized that eventually what happened was it allowed people to meet me without judgment. Because I was like, dude, I've been here too. I mean, that's why I've got my little lantern. I was like, I probably, in this labyrinth, I ran into every pitfall that they could fall into because I made every mistake along the way that I could probably have made. And
Yeah.
I love what you were talking about, though, where we had to do something with it. Because I like to think of it like pain, trauma, past regrets, like all of that is like fuel, right? And then I have a choice. I can either let the fuel drown me and lay there and sink, or I can do the hardest thing in the world, which is strike a match, fight back, and rise like a phoenix. But the
Hmm.
most fertile soil in the world is ash.
Hmm.
And sometimes it all has to burn down because it was all built faulty. Connections in the brain were made, not all of it faulty, but there were certain connections that were faulty, like let's say a worthiness wound. If I have a worthiness wound, I give I'm worthy the color black, right?
Hmm.
And I've now paint or I'm unworthy with the color black, then I've painted my whole world black and I can't see that I'm worthy of anything. That means I'm unworthy of my children, I'm unworthy of my job, I'm unworthy of literally everything. And that's where that faulty wire gets crossed because we're not unworthy. It was almost like
Yeah.
a
It was some,
systematical lie that we were taught
it's a
from.
huge lie. Massive lie. I mean, you just nailed it. It's just a huge lie. You know what I mean? And it's just so crazy how we've all been like duped and convinced of it. It's almost like drinking
We get
water now.
controlled that way. We're easier to
Yeah,
be
oh yeah.
controlled.
You look, it's so easy to control people. All you got to do is pop a post, and it's on social media, so it must be right. If you want to take control of your life, there's good things to everything. But if you really want to take control, unplug that social media for like a week, put your phone down, take only calls and texts from people you love and care, and we'll see who what actually controls you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I got rid of all my social media, and obviously for music I have to have it for those reasons. I don't have a personal one. It's not that I don't think I should have one. It's just I don't it doesn't do anything for me. I mean, I just made that choice, and I have been way happier because of it. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like it's great.
Yeah.
You get to see pictures of family, friends, influencers. Buy this, check this out. We got a deal. That's great. For business reasons, makes sense. But from a personal perspective, I was like, didn't do anything for me. Got rid of it. Mind opened up. Everyone's like, oh,
Well,
did you see this? Did you see that video? I'm like, no, I didn't. You
no,
know?
exactly. No, and I agree with you because, one of the things that I've learned, like working with, especially like at-risk youth and just like our youth today, is that back in my time, I wasn't judged by how many likes a picture had to think I was beautiful. I wasn't judged by, you were only judged around the people that were in your immediate vicinity. But now, children and minds, and then even adults, right? We don't realize that we're
Hmm.
looking at the best pieces of somebody's life, not the worst.
Yes.
And now it makes me feel like my life is horrible because I've looked at the best parts of your life. but you're not showing me the dark parts of your life. You're just showing me the
That's
good, which is fine for social media as long as the consumer or the viewer keeps in mind like that's not all what's real.
well, no one wants. I don't think people want what's real. They want what's like an alternate reality to the reality, and that's truth. And people could argue all day long, but it's like, okay, let's prove it wrong, and now you can't, and because it's like be who you are, accept who you are, and that's who you are. Doesn't mean you have to be disrespectful. Doesn't mean you can't love somebody. Doesn't mean you can't be indifferent. We need to be indifferent. There's a reason why all those different trees outside my house coexist together, and they're all different because they're all getting something from something, right? They want the same thing: live, breathe, eat, have a good life. It's pretty simple to me. Um, but the other thing too is a lot of people are always concerned. It's like, oh, you get this many likes, and then if you go to YouTube and you get this many, then they monetize and then they give you money. And I'm like, so you're telling me you want me to get 1 million of X, and then you're going to give me $1,000 for me putting in, let's say, about 2 weeks to a month's worth of work. Let's just say. So I'm being used to make these companies, more views and more likes and more comments, but yet they give me a penny.
Yeah.
That sounds super unfair. So I was like, "No, I don't really give a shit about the likes. Don't care about them. If I'm going to have music and I'm going to have this platform, I want it to have some substance and have some weight. Aren't you concerned? I am not concerned over that. If people hear the songs and they hear the music and they love it and they gravitate towards it, great. If they don't like it, great. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't bother me. They can comment and do and say whatever they want. You know what I mean? And I don't care how many comments it gets. I don't care how many likes it gets. And these massive, massive companies, they want you to work, and maybe they have some rationale behind it, right? Being a business owner, I know you can rationalize almost anything, right? Um, but it's just at the end of the day, it's like for me, I was like, I want the music to speak. I want to get on stage and for people to hear this music and to connect with it. Like when you see your favorite band, say like Foo Fighters or whoever it may be, Dave Grohl really doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's not worried about like certain things like that. Maybe this artist wants to rock Louis Vuitton. Maybe this artist wants to rock some thrift store clothes and play in front of millions of people. That's just who they are as individuals. And so it's like I kind of have that same approach that he's got. That doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't concern me. Some of the management who work with me and whatnot could say differently. And but for me personally, it's just I'm not concerned with that. I just want to get my music to the world. And if they hear it, that's awesome. And if they don't, that's okay too. I'm not doing it strictly because I want to be like, oh my gosh, this person came and I have to specifically do it for that. I got to do it for me first,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
what's beautiful about that though is I feel like it keeps that authenticity in there because I feel like everybody always says, I want authenticity. I want authenticity. But then they're confronted with authenticity and they don't realize that that makes you face your own shadow side and, actually embrace
Yeah.
all parts of yourself and all of your beauty.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But the beautiful thing about that is, though, is when I start being real in that authenticity and I stop caring about the likes and I start doing kind of like what you were saying, right? Is that I then pull in things that are actually have substance and I build a community that's actually based on something tight knit instead of something that's very fickle, right? Because those million likes can go away in 5 seconds because you all of a sudden aren't who they wanted you to be or what they thought you were going to be in 5 seconds. you
Uh-huh.
know you 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 change, and also with those million likes becomes the stipulation of, are you going to do what I tell you to do? Because now I want you to behave in a way that I want you to behave for me to continue to like your stuff and to do these
Or to
things,
click, click, click.
and
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And before we know it, it's become something that actually has almost in the shadows stolen something from us that we didn't even realize was stolen.
Yeah. They're just it's stealing your identity and stealing who you are, and it's I played festivals my whole life. I've toured around the planet. I've done a lot of stuff. I've met a lot of artists, and I'm like, oh, this person's rad. Even some people recently who like blown up, and I met them in person, and it work obviously always goes two ways, right? It's never what you expect, but sometimes it is what you expect. I met a gentleman, and I'll leave the name out, and massive, massive artist, and he was just an absolute douchebag. I watched how he treated people, almost hitting people in a golf cart, and I went up to say hi. I was like, "Hey, man, I love some of your music." He's like, "Ah, yeah, that's fine." Just didn't give a shit. I'm like, what a fake pile of shit. I mean, he just fake, just absolute fake. And I'm like, gosh, this is amazing. And it just, I've met a lot of artists like that, and some of them I've met, and they were just like, they'll have conversations with you about anything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like as a kid, I was a big fan of the rock band Candlebox, and we were at Blue Ridge to do some business stuff, right? And not like a massive, massive band like an Adele, right? But to me, they were iconic, and sure enough, I'm just standing there, and the singer just walks right up next to me. And I look over and I go, "What?" And my wife's like, "Hey, you should get a picture with him." So I started just kind of chatting up a conversation. Sweetest guy. And then when they played later on that day, oh, sorry, I just let me click something on my phone. Um, I was standing on stage, and I noticed that the other bands, not fans, were watching Candlebox play, and I was like, "That's kind of odd." And they were all influenced by him. I'm assuming, right? And I don't see the singer and their guitar players coming out, and I looked to my left, and I'll never forget that. I looked strictly to my left, and I looked at him and I say, "Have a good show." He's like, "Hey man, it was really nice meeting you yesterday. I hope you have a good time." Just generosity. I was like, "Phew, it's awesome." You know what I mean? And there's like a small bit of people in the music world that are just not. They're really, really good people, and a lot of them are just like they don't know, and it's weird. It's like a labyrinth. They're like, okay, I heard this song, so I got to dress like this person. I got to write like this person. I got to do that. I'm like, what happened with just being you, an artist? Like, just get in a fucking room, get a guitar, piano, bass, drums, whatever you do, and just find who you are. What happened to that? What happened to our artistry? And it's all shelled. And it's
Yeah.
all, okay, let's box it together. And it works two ways, though. Let's go and get it. And because I know I can make money for this small amount of time, let me just copy what everybody's doing, dressing, all this other kind of stuff, and just do it. Yeah, it probably will work. It will get you somewhere. But what about the same perspective? And you go, I'm gonna box this together because this really means something to me. I've shined it, I grew it, I love it. I put a lot of time and effort and faith into it. I'm gonna go ahead and I want to see what the world. I'm just gonna push it out there and I hope it inspires somebody. Those are
And those are
legends.
those pure souls, man.
Oh yeah.
There was an old saying, well, it's a really famous quote, and it kind of ties back to what you're saying. It says, and so almost like those other artists are actually doing the job of an artist, because there was a famous quote that says, "The job of an artist is like that of a lover, to awaken the parts of you that you never knew were there, and to teach you the things that you did not know." And essentially, it's because they learned that, like you were talking about in that process of learning self through their artistry, they were teaching others how to learn their self through their art, through that artistry. And
Yeah.
so they were awakening parts of people with that. But if I just continue to jump on this trend with TikTok or this trend here, then what I've almost done is I've awakened people to parts of themselves to follow others and to not embrace the authentic core of themselves. Because I believe that, like, so a lot of like what I do with therapy is also like sound healing and frequency healing and things like that, which is what got me so
Oh wow.
into music. And it's almost like the frequency is being transmitted to who you're like to your listeners, because
Yeah.
they are looking up to you, and you become, I don't, to some extent they idolize that, and they try, the listeners trying to follow the footsteps of the artist, and the artist, I think, sometimes doesn't realize how big of a lead they have there, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like when I was going
Oh
through
yeah.
my hardest times on the face of the planet, they were always alone, but the one thing that was always there was music. And one thing I always loved about music is it doesn't judge you. It doesn't care if you're rich. It doesn't care if you're poor. It doesn't care your color, your race, where you're from. When you find that artist that you said brought that something into this world,
Yeah.
you are able to be transported into that world with that artist. How do you go
You,
about making your world to transport people into your world with you?
well, check this out. You just nailed something that I thought was so significant. You have everybody who's in political and spiritual disarray and believing all these different things, which is that's their right. You know what I mean? That's do whatever
Yeah.
you're gonna do. But check how powerful music is, and I'm gonna end it with something. My grandma, she was like staunch Baptist, and she told me this, right? From the South, she has like a story that's just like, holy crap. She came out here with no money with her and her dad and my great grandma, and they had to walk through Texas for like 25 miles in the hot sun. And just crazy stories that I've always said she should have a movie. Just crazy. She
Yeah.
came out here, loved everything, came one of the biggest real estate agents, never would just always help anybody. She would go in the street driving a brand new car and she'd go pick up a sock that she found, wash it to give it to somebody. Crazy. And I was like, wow. But one thing to me, she did tell me something. When you go to festivals, okay, this is before I get to what I was going to say. You have everybody from every political background, every spiritual, non spiritual background, every belief, everything you can imagine. But magically, they're all congregated together to see this one artist deliver a message that speaks to all of them. I told her about that. I was like, yeah, that's why I do music, Grandma. It's so transcending to see all this different stuff, and then everybody comes together, and they're not fighting anymore, they're not protesting anymore, and they're not doing some of these things to some extent, even though some do, but they're all together. And she's like, she puts her hands on me and she says, "Well, grandson, I want to tell you that's why." And she, like I said, she's very religious, very spiritual, and she said that's why God called it him, so he could speak to everybody. And I was like, whoa. Just that simple answer, right? From her perspective, was very powerful. She said the power of music brings people together.
It does.
And
And
I
it
was like,
also
whoa.
it creates almost a new energetic field. Like so I one of the things I did love about when I went to college and like I was doing everything to become a counselor, I also have had I worked at SOS Ministries for a while as the youth minister there.
Oh,
And
nice.
I ended up becoming more spiritual because I realized how much religion in the matter actually was hurting people instead of like the God in the matter, if that makes sense. Like I
Oh,
still fully
100%.
believe in God, but the religious aspect to me is sometimes I see a lot of people that come in my office that don't believe in God anymore, and it's because they've been religiously damned in some way. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
always trying to backpedal, like, that originally God meant love, and if those things weren't of love, then they weren't of Him, and that was His last rule that He gave us. And even
Mm-hmm.
challenging the church with that, they didn't like that challenge because they would scripture twist, like, for instance, honor your father and your mother, right? Do you know the next
Sounds pretty.
verse?
What is honor thy father and thy mother? Um, I don't know the next verse, but I know what you're leading to.
But nobody wants to say the next verse. Parents, don't provoke your child to anger.
Uh-huh. The sins of the
It
father
tells
shall
you
fall upon, or the children shall fall upon the heads of the father, which means how
exactly.
we treat our kids, they will become. So you think the great creator in any aspect of anything, what he said and he gave us was to love people and do those, and what choices they make is the choices that they make. That's their
Exactly.
choice. They have to live by that choice, right? And that was the big thing. There's a lot of good religions, a lot of good religions on the planet. The problem is there's a lot of people that get involved in the organization and their fear of judgment, so they outward express that fear of judgment of other people, and then start pointing. If you're not like this, then you must not be X, Y, and Z, right?
Well,
And
oops, sorry. I'm so sorry. I did not
oh,
mean to
you're
cut you off.
oh, you're totally fine. We're having reception issues, so I'm always trying to catch. I'm like, okay, still there, but yeah, that's the big thing. It's you know, like whatever religion you come from, spirituality or not. I mean, you look at like his son who came here and didn't have a home, didn't have things, didn't have a Maserati, didn't have all these wonderful things, right? That bring happiness. He just had relationship. You can't be religious in any way if you don't have a relationship first with him. And I think that no matter what piece of wood or stone that you strike, not going to have any lasting effect. At the end of the day, it'll just be a congregation of people meeting. And
Yeah.
that kind of goes into the counseling realm. You have to have a relationship with somebody. And if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But just recognize it, And if you're going to commit to it fully.
Yeah.
Like, don't leave. Like, don't tell yourself there's a middle ground. Like, just don't do it. Because if you're looking at religion or non-religion, people who've had great beliefs or believed in the higher power, um, it's an all or nothing. You can't be like, you know what? I'm gonna stop drinking. I'm completely sober. How many drinks have you had this year? Well, that's the thing. I've only had a couple beers and then I had a couple shots. No, that means you're still an addict. No, I didn't. Oh, yeah, yeah. Doesn't matter if you took a gap of drinking one day and then you spread it out over 30 days. Are you consecutively doing it? That means you're religious about it, right? Which means you have a
Mhm.
routine about it, right? Which means you're doing it, right? Which means you said you were clean, right? And you're not. So, got to find the recognizing spot. And from a counselor's perspective, and you being in ministry, I had the same thing. A very strong religious background, grew up in. Still religious today, and still gone through a question God, question all these different things, question all this stuff, right? And every time I had sincerity with my question, and instead of directing it out that person in the church that wronged me, or the person in that factor that I believed wronged me, anytime I took it to from just me, I'm not saying this for anybody else, but when I just went and prayed about it, I noticed that I got an answer that was very gentle. You
Yeah.
just shouldn't be focusing on them.
No, and I agree. Actually, the reason I stopped working, so SOS stands for Save Our Streets. And the reason
Hmm.
I quit working there and kind of took the stance of away from religion was because there was a lot of hate that I noticed that they would condemn a lot of the girls for things. And being the
Hmm.
lead person, I couldn't condone what they were saying because that's
Oh, for
not what
sure.
I believed. And I guess
Hmm.
my point is, and I may get a lot of hate for this, but when we think about other religions, I think to some extent it's almost all the same. We're still all calling to this higher power, and I don't think that we're recognizing it the same because our terminology is different. For instance,
Hmm.
spiritualists call it manifestation. Christians will call it prayer. You know, others call it spells. You know,
Hmm.
it's almost still the same thing that we're speaking into existence and
Hmm.
realizing that we're not as different as we think we are. But I'm still very firm. God is what brought me to this moment and a kind of crazy experience I even had yesterday because God, when you're talking about kind, gentle answers, right? Is every once in a
Hmm.
while I'll be like, okay, God, am I on the right path? And yesterday I was in a bad mood for some reason, just like my day was just like, eh. And I go outside and this bee is chasing me around, which the bees never chase me around. And this bee's just chasing me, chasing me, chasing me. I'm like, okay, fine, just get out of my truck. And I thought I got him out of my truck. Close the truck. Bee's still in the truck. My son looks over. He's like, ugh, fine, mom. He rolls down the window. The bee flies out. I get to my office and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I'm running late. I promise they put you on my schedule. I didn't even realize you were on it, you know? And I'm so sorry. And I look at her and on her chest is a huge bee and a little beehive and two sunflowers around it. And I was like, and at first I didn't say anything, but we go in the room and without divulging any other real information about her, as we start talking about her life. And eventually she was like, she had said something to me to the extent of, I've been through so much pain and heartache, but I feel like God led me straight to you so that you could help me heal these things. And then I told her because I don't worry about being sounding crazy anymore. I'm like, I believe what I believe, and I believe that God guides my steps every way, and I'm going to follow God because that's what I feel like my mission on this
Hmm.
earth is to follow and share love, light, and
Yeah.
and she was in complete tears and shambles, and I was like, and I believe God led me to you too. He was telling me about you before I even got here. He was softening my heart because he knew I was in a bad mood, and he knew the minute I saw that bee on your chest I was going to be like, oh, you're right, God, I'm sorry. Maybe I should soften my
Hmm.
mood, soften my approach, and become more understanding because you're still sending things to me.
I have to agree with you, and I've had really high in depth conversations with people who were like super hateful right out of the gate. I've heard it, and I just walk over and I was like, "How's your day going?" well, I think this and this, and I can't believe that they're saying this, and just from whatever experience they have. And I just sit there and I would listen. hmm Oh, I get it. Okay, you hate God. It's awesome. They're like, what? I said, it's awesome. Oh, you hate Jesus? That's great. Oh yeah, you hate Muhammad? Oh, okay. And I just sat there and did that. And I just walked over to this individual, and I looked at her, and I said, I hope you have a good day. She goes, aren't you going to respond? I said, yeah, I'm going to respond. I said, do you mind if I respond though? She's like, yes, I want to hear your take on this. I think all of this is to control Eastern or Western society and blah, blah, blah. And she was very educated. And I said, okay, but can I respond? I must have said it about 50 times. She's like, yes. And I said, okay. I just looked at her and she took a deep breath. As soon as she took this deep breath, I went and gave her a hug. And I said, Mrs. So and so, I just hope you have a good day. I'm going to go across the street and have a burger real quick. Take care. Right? Sure enough, that Mrs. So and so walked into that restaurant, sat down. She's like, why'd you do that? And I said, why did I do what? She said, why'd you just lean and give me a hug? I said, I just want you to have a good day. But you didn't respond to my answer. I said, I did. She's like, no, you
Or
didn't. I said,
love.
yeah, I gave you a little piece of love and I just hope you have a good day. It's okay that we're indifferent. So go have fun. She's like, oh, well, I hope you have a good day too. I said, yeah, you too. Just walked away. We don't have to agree on everything. In fact, it's boring, so I don't mind. Like I've had those different conversations. Like I said, I have a very different background with a lot of stuff, and I also have, you know, I grew up in a very strong woman family. I'm the only boy, so for me, my mom is really strong. I have a daughter, really strong-minded. You know what I mean? And so I've learned that women are a very powerful force, a very super powerful force. I have one of the girls I worked with a long time ago. She's like, so this other girl came in and she said this. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but she's like, women don't have any place in the workforce and I hate this. And I'm looking at this other girl I work with because I was sitting down at the time at the desk. I looked over and she's like, I just can't stand this and this and that. And she's like, Miss So and so, I show up on time for work. I work. I bring food home to my family because my husband died. So, two kids. Um, I do this and this and this. She's like, yeah, well, that's because of you. And she's like, well, okay, well, have a good day. The girl who I'm referring to was the owner of the company. Let me repeat that. She was the owner of the company. She said, work hard, do what you can, and there's going to be adversity. It's not going to go away. Say
Yeah.
what you want. It's not going to go away. But if you're not working and doing what you can, and maybe because you can't grow with that business or you can't grow with that organization or something, it's because that's actually not where you're supposed to be. You know, go find somewhere where you can grow. And maybe it's your attitude. She just sat there and drilled into her. She's like, I'm not saying what you're saying is 100% wrong because I've seen it on both sides. But she's like, I just wanted to let you know I'm the owner of this huge corporation. Her mouth just dropped. And I'll just never forget. Like, this was before everything that's going on now, way before. And I remember looking back, I'm like, what a powerful way of responding. I was in shock. You know what I mean? Um, but anyways, I think it's what choices you take and what you do with it, you know?
Well, there's a,
And go ahead.
sorry.
Oh, you're fine. It's just the technology thing cuts out,
Oh
so
yeah.
it's all good.
No, no, you're good. There's like a little bit of lag, and I think I hear like that little space. I'm so sorry. I was just gonna say, like kind of like what you're saying is, if you go back to it, Jesus was essentially the original rebel, right? He came
hmm
down and he stood against the church, and because the church was that he who was without sin cast the first stone, and the only person that was without sin, which was Jesus, didn't cast a stone.
hmm Absolutely.
And the beautiful part of that, and I think where a lot of religious aspects get it wrong, is the more we force something down someone's throat, we teach them that whoever is there is someone who wants to condemn them, not love them. And to really be that other force is to make it, it's a decision, it's a choice. Don't get me wrong, I could respond with hate. I could respond through all my trauma and all my pain that the world has caused me. but making that choice to respond in love every time, and making that choice to just be understanding and realize like we don't have to be, and I wish more people understood that we do not have to agree in the same things in order to love each other and to show them kindness and to show them respect.
Yeah, it's like I also use this one as like the respect category, and I don't know why this hit me this way. I I was asking this guy one time, well, my old band, we played in Alaska, and the first night they didn't really like us. I don't know, it's just because of our style of music, I don't know. But we ended up playing an AC/DC song, and the whole club like erupted because we played a cover. But I remember we went out snowboarding, and me and my bass player Kyle from this band Shorty I was in, we were like very unprepared. We had like jeans and like just a basic jacket. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. I didn't think we were gonna go snowboarding. Out of all places in Alaska, right? Where it's like a mecca. And I was like, oh, this sucks. And then as they were talking about where they were gonna take us, I remember I talked to somebody while everyone was getting dressed or whatever, and I was like, man, because I didn't really know that much about bears or anything like that. I'm like, man, I got to make sure, when if I see a bear, I'm in like hypochondriac mode that I respect the bear and I don't move. And this guy looks at me and what did he say? He said something like, in my where I come from in my country, we've we understand that the we don't respect the the bear doesn't respect us. And I'm like, huh? It didn't click at the time. And then all of a sudden, it clicked. He's like, the bear doesn't need to earn your respect at all. You're in the bear's environment. I said, okay. He goes, you're not, that bear doesn't need to earn it. You're in his environment. You can trust. You don't have to earn the bear's trust. You can trust that that bear, if you get next to her cubs or whatever, that she will tear you apart. You can trust that. And she is not going to earn your respect. And I'm like, wow. He's like, as is life, right? And walks away. I was like, and I was like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, so don't like approach the bear. And he's like, you're missing my point. And I'm like, okay, what am I missing? And he goes, you think you have to earn people's trust and you have to earn their respect. Like you have something that you owe them. And I was like, well, I'm talking about a bear. He goes, no, you don't need to do that. You need to live in this moment and you need to understand. And I remember him walking away and his wife looks at me and I kind of took that. And I think that's why we keep like having to feel like we got to do all this stuff to make people happy, do all this stuff because we got to earn their trust. So as soon as they earn their trust, they never cared about you regardless. So they're just going to use you, abuse you, and throw you away. Right? Starts with you. Kind of full circle this around real quick. That's what brought me back to Fragments. I had to just have the respect instead of thinking I needed to earn the respect for all these things that I thought went wrong. And the problems actually created it. You know what I mean? I allowed the problems to happen. As we allow things to happen, I allowed the turmoil because I just didn't have the strength at the time to deal with that situation, problem, want, or need. So all the music that I create, it has a substance to it, and it also gets. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You cut out for just a second. Last thing I heard was all the music I create.
Oh, yes. Sorry. All the music I create, from me, I want to have just a message. I want it to be raw and real, and I'm not trying to get anybody's approval for it.
What really
And it's
helped,
that
like, because I know that
simple.
that's like a challenge that I work with clients every day. And one of the reasons I started Shine a Light in the Dark is because, you know, music sometimes is the only therapy a lot of people ever receive. And it's the only known form of therapy that they get. And,
Absolutely.
hearing you say that, it just, in your perspective and in your life, what really helped you stand and hone in on your authenticity?
Can you hear
Because
me?
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there it goes.
What, and so like when I work with them, a lot of them have they struggle with their vulnerability. And half of our authenticity is our vulnerability, being vulnerable about who we are, both strengths and our weaknesses, and all of the
Hmm.
above. Kind of like in Fragments, how you were like, this is raw, this is who I am, take it or leave it, right? And
Hmm.
I love that. And what advice would you have for them, though, to learn to stand in their own authenticity, that their own vulnerability, even though we've been taught is bad, isn't?
Some people's bad. I mean, what I could give advice on, some people's bad is another person's good. It's how they view it, right? And how can they stand and how could they do all this? Sometimes it's not, we don't need to prove anything to people. I think that we're just so insensitive for attention. We don't need to do that. If a person's going to be who they are and people don't disagree, if they disagree with it, that's fine. That's your God-given right, right? But as soon as you start crossing the boundary of being violent and then hurting somebody because of it, at that point, it's someone's going to get hurt, harmed, or die. So find out how much it means to you, right? And but if you're willing to do something and it means that much to you, got to see everything all the way through. Got to see it through. And everything is going to be different for some people, but really take some mental inventory and some spiritual or non-spiritual, wherever you believe in, inventory on everything. Like, just don't be so reactive to it just to get a post, just to get check it out. I got a like. It's stupid. It's dumb. You know what I mean? It's not gonna do anything for you. I clicked this right now. What happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. Right? That's isn't that crazy? It's like we are trained to this stupid mindset of these certain things. Be who you are, respect people, you know what I mean? And if you agree with them, great. If you don't, great too. But you don't got to be disrespectful to them, right? Like I watched this interview with this guy who was speaking to this girl, and she said something super violent to him, and then she just punched him right in the face. I mean, just socked him. And this guy turned, and he's like, "That was a pretty good hit." She hits him again, and he turns and looks at her. This gentleman that she was hitting was like ex special forces, 6'9", been in war for 7 years, and he's like, I've seen so much death and destruction. And he said, I just want to heal people. He didn't say anything religious. He didn't say anything spiritual. He just wanted to help people, and he was just interviewing people. What can we do to help others? He just walks them and just decks him twice. He didn't do anything, and just people are that freaking crazy nowadays. You know what I mean? No one, they don't want to talk. They just want to react. But when you get to a point in life where those two people are doing that, someone's going to get harmed, hurt, or die. And that's what's unfortunate. But kind of going back to what you said before I went off on a little tangent, just be who you are, but you have to understand who you are is always going to have consequences of judgment or always going to have something. So don't choose something if you're not willing to deal with the effects of those things,
Yeah.
both positive and negative.
I love what you said
So,
about how you were like, he had experienced so much death that all he wanted to do was heal people. And I think that
mhm.
that's kind of a really key point because of the fact that I think people forget that it's those that have been most wounded that generally decide to be kind because they've seen
Sure.
so much darkness, they've seen so much pain, and they could respond in the same pain that you're giving, but that's that choice, right? That we make to not respond in that pain because we've seen where that goes and it doesn't lead anyone anywhere good. It
Oh
just
yeah,
leads to more
I've
pain.
a lot more pain, and I saw two things that actually speak to that exact conversation, that exact point that we were talking about. You just mentioned, and this guy, I'm, he was in a gang, and this other kid was in a gang. I'll leave names out, and I witnessed something, and the gang member said, "Oh, they're going up here, and they're walking up and down the hill, and they seem to be protesting, doing all that. They better stay away from our territory." And I was like, "Oh, well, people are just trying to walk in the street. I'm trying to just get to my truck to get, you know, out of this place and get back home." And this guy walks over and they were protesting, and he told them, he yelled, he said, "Stay away from this area. You guys go on the other street." And they didn't listen. So the gentleman walks out with a gun and just starts firing away at them, smoking a cigarette like it was absolutely nothing. Laid two people down in the street. They all scattered. He said, "That's what cowards do. I told them to stay out of my area." And they were standing up for what they believed in, both sides. And this person came along and just destroyed what they thought. And I watched it happen. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I remember looking at him, and he put his head down. And I know the guy was in a big, big gang. And I'm like, wow. All because he didn't want them to go on their street where they do their gang stuff. He didn't care about their message, but they did, right? And I just watched it. And I remember people calling different authorities to come help. Couldn't even get through. And loss of human life because of belief, right? They were willing to die for that. But some people don't care what you're willing to die for. If they tell you don't do something from what you believe in and you're in their environment, just like that bear, they're going to take charge for what their environment is. And I still, this day, I'm still in shock. It like happened so lightning fast. It was just like
Yeah.
thousands of people down to like nobody. And then I remember I was like, well, of course, my place where I'm getting my vehicle to leave is across the street. And he said, screamed, "Anybody else picks up the bodies, the same will be done. Leave them there so you can see what's going to happen next who comes across here." And I couldn't believe that we're in this day and age and people are still doing that. Like the medieval times, right? Killing people and putting them on stakes as spear. I'm like, it's just a new way.
You know, I
Crazy.
it is it's crazy, but I guess there's a part of my soul that could get some hate for this, but I want to speak on it. So
Hmm.
so I grew up in and out of foster care and in and out of a lot of the streets kind of that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
And when I went to juvie for the first time, I was 11 and I was in there with gosh, a lot of 17-year-olds and I was a tiny 11-year-old. I'm not even 4 foot 11 as an adult, you know? So I was
Hmm.
a very tiny 11-year-old. And my mom, because she comes from a long line of orphans and a lot of bad situations, my mom taught me one thing as a kid, not the right thing. And by the way, I am not condoning anything. I'm stating a mentality, right?
Cool.
Not condoning anything. I just want to
Hmm.
make that clear to you and the audience. She taught me
Oh,
one
that's
thing.
fine.
She said, if you take the biggest guy down, no one else will fuck with you. Pardon my French. So
It's okay.
when I was in juvie, she was like, she had always told me, you take the biggest one down. So if you're going to fight anyone, you fight one fight instead of 20.
Hmm.
And what that means is that you understand that you're in an environment that it's almost like the environment, like you said, of the bear. You're in an environment of people that don't respect you. So it's kind of like if I go and take down this person, right? And then I let this person take my bread off my plate, even though taking my bread off my plate's not a big deal, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
now everyone's witnessed the bread being taken off my plate. And now everybody believes that they can take now my fish sticks and now my this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
Because I've now displayed a certain level of weakness in an environment that wants to exploit your weaknesses. It wants to find out
Correct.
what your weaknesses are to take those specific things away from you. And sometimes it puts us and there's always a choice, and I want to elaborate on the fact that there's always a choice, but there's I'm also
Hmm.
trying to elaborate that there's mentality in there that needs to be fixed in those kinds of environments is that number one, because they're in that environment, they're so reactive in their own trauma that they don't, to them, it's just another day. And to them, it's just, well, I killed these people. I've now left it on the street, which is one of the most horrible things that I've heard. And I don't,
Hmm.
but what I mean is I guess one of the unfortunate parts of me as a counselor is I try to understand where everybody's coming from, even
For
if it
sure.
is the bad
Hmm.
guy. And I think, and I'm not positive, but sometimes is that what I almost hear is if I, because once he said, and this is where it comes back almost full circle to what you said, like now that I've said it, I have to do it kind of thing. If you're not ready for the consequences, the minute he said
Hmm.
you can't walk on my turf, that was heard
Oh yeah,
by
they
everyone.
don't care.
So the second
Yeah.
now that somebody walked on my turf, like it would be like if I said you can't have my biscuit, and or X is going to happen, or even with my own children, right? Like sometimes I'm like, yeah, you just made me punish you because I had to tell you if you did this, there was going to be a consequence. And even though I don't want there to be a consequence, I now have to give you one because I told you there was going to be one. And what I mean by that is both parties should have respected. It's like understanding that you're in such a highly unhealed environment that environment can't, it doesn't see human life the same way anymore because human life is just something that comes and goes constantly in its world versus an
Hmm.
outsider can see that that's not right and you shouldn't be doing these and that was not worth it, like they were just walking on your street, it wasn't.
Yeah,
And I
but
guess what I'm trying to bring to light is almost the environment of the bear to understand, number one, that I don't innately think that those people are evil at their core. I think that they've lived in an environment that has made them act in a reactionary state instead of a responding state, which is a state that in a healed response we have the ability to do. But in their world it's still so dog eat dog
hmm.
that that could have been their death and their family's death at the same time, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
I hope that
absolutely, and
made sense. And I hope
that
that
makes
didn't
sense
sound
to
like I
me.
was condoning anything. That didn't sound like I was condoning
No,
anything, right? Like, I
no,
totally am not condoning that. And I think that is the most horrible thing. I guess I was just trying to explain that I don't think that all, that I think
well,
that we all make,
you're describing the wolf and the bear. The wolf can be a wolf, the bear can be a bear. That guy was the bear. He doesn't understand what it's like to be a wolf. He doesn't
exactly.
understand what it's like to run fast. He doesn't understand that he's got a big, big snout and pointy ears. He doesn't understand that. He understands that he is a bear. And that bear gave what he said, and that was it. And a lot of things like this in life, like people mean what they say. And the world we think we live in is not the world we think we live in. And I've seen a lot of stuff that's so contrary to so many things. And I'm like, whoa, that just happened. And it kind of gives like the weight to the music. To me, it's like having stop being so apologetic and stop being, so disrespectful like a lot of people have been. Like, I just want to get this out and hopefully it helps somebody and it can send my message. And if it doesn't and people hate me, great. I'm not doing it for you. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be uh, something I'm not. I'm not trying to do that. You know what I mean? It just doesn't interest me. And whatever interests you is interests you, and that's okay. I've found my calling, and whatever trials and tribulations and things I've had to scrape through to get there, I made a decision. I made a decision. That easy. You want to keep on this path? The result is that guy saying, if you come on my area or my whatever, I'm going to do this. They didn't believe him, and they got laid down. Now, that person who is someone's daughter, husband, partner, whatever, is not going home. The literal term is sometimes when people say certain things, they say certain things and they mean these certain things. And it doesn't mean a form of disrespect. I've been in areas where straight up gang members said, "Hey, I'll never forget this." And he said some certain things to me. He's like, "Right now I wouldn't go in there." I said, "I'm just going to get something neat." And he goes, "Well, you might go in there, but you might not come out." You hear me? I said, "Yeah, I'll go across the street to the other place." He's like, "All right, man, have a good day." I knew what that meant,
Well,
you
a
know?
lot of times they don't actually want to hurt you.
No, and
And
that's
their
he just said,
core
"Have a good
human
day."
souls don't want to actually hurt you. And you know, and that's kind of like that a beautiful example of it is that they, generally speaking, they don't actually want to hurt you. That's why I was pointing you. And I think that that's even why the gentleman was giving a warning, like, please, like, almost within those warnings, sometimes it's please don't do this. Find out. Well, exactly. And, when you talk about the bear, and that's the funny part about life, right? Is if I was to go literally poke a bear, I would expect to get bit. But sometimes we go and poke humans and we don't expect to get bit. But if you poke a bear enough times, even a dog in a corner that doesn't want to fight you, if you trap it in a corner, will eventually fight back. I'm deciding not to die. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, no, I've loved speaking with you and I've loved listening to your insights and your strengths and just like your inspiration. I'm sorry that we didn't talk about the music as much this time, but I believed that your personal story was so important and inspiring that I feel like it was speaking volumes for itself. So I appreciate you and just your raw vulnerability and how that's even being portrayed in your music. I do want to honor your time though, and I do want to make sure that you do get at least a small chance to talk about like what you're kind of currently working on to make sure that you can let listeners hear that. But I did want to say though that I don't normally get the opportunity to go that in depth about life, but I feel like it's so important. Exactly. Yeah. 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 Actually, age is a thing, but it's a good thing. And what I mean by that is it comes with knowledge. Exactly. Because I actually feel like age should be a good thing. You know, in most cultures, we respect our elders. Like they're a person of knowledge and somebody that you go to for wisdom and things like that. And so, especially like in the industry, when I hear people like, oh, you're too old or something like that, it's like, but what gifts and qualities were given because I've waited this long? It means that I've had this much experience, time, mistakes, all of these other things that I'm now able to bring to the table that I wouldn't have been able to bring at 19. You know? Yeah. It is. It really was. And I truly, you know, everybody, guys, please, I'm going to leave all the links down below in the description. Please make sure you check them out. Send them lots of love, send them lots of light, you know. And I really, honestly, I truly appreciate you coming on here and allowing me to have some of that time because I know how precious it is. And I loved how you were talking about like the energetic portions of even like, you know, what we give energy to gets our energy. And my energy is important to me and it's important to those that I love to make sure that I'm giving that to them. And not in something like you were talking about that's going to break me down or make me doubt myself when my mission is too strong to look here. And so I absolutely love your mission. I love you as a soul and what you're supporting and just your music is beautiful and it was honestly from the bottom of my soul it was a true honor speaking with you today. So I appreciate you more than you know. Thank you so much. Thank you.